When you realize that, unlike the European Union, every one of these countries will have their own currency, but a common settlement currency, it is the composition of the settlement currency that destroys both the transaction and the settlement value of the dollar in the treasury market. What it does is it greatly starts to reduce demand for both. And as there is less demand and more supply, we would see inflation and interest rates go higher, which ultimately, little by little, starts to wreak havoc upon the system.
In recent years, the BRICS bloc has made significant strides in its de-dollarization agenda, aiming to reduce reliance on the US dollar in global trade. The BRICS alliance has kick-started its de-dollarization efforts through various means, focusing on integrating new payment mechanisms that facilitate transactions in local currencies. These systems are designed to operate without the involvement of the US dollar, marking a substantial step forward in the bloc's agenda. AndySchectman, president and CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals, offers insights into this shifting economic landscape. He notes a significant trend among central banks that previously supported US spending. They are now selling dollar assets and increasingly purchasing commodities, emphasizing gold. Schectman also points to speculation about a coordinated effort involving over 150 countries to move away from the dollar simultaneously, though he acknowledges this has yet to materialize. A recent development underscoring this trend is the landmark trade deal between BRICS partners India and Russia. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first visit to Moscow in 5 years resulted in an agreement with Russian President Vladimir Putin that is expected to impact multiple sectors. This pact exemplifies the growing economic ties within the BRICS alliance and their collective move towards alternative trade arrangements. Schectman argues that these developments could have far-reaching consequences for the global economy. He suggests that as demand for dollars and U.S. treasuries potentially decreases, the U.S. could face higher inflation and interest rates. According to Schectman, this scenario might escalate into a crisis affecting various financial institutions heavily invested in dollar-denominated assets, including banks and insurance companies. Please tune in for our exploration of AndySchectman's expert analysis. Don't miss out on future content. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay in the loop. We appreciate your support.
Well, first of all, it's important to mention that Enbridge supports cross-border payment of local currencies, of central bank digital currencies. And part of this infrastructure people push back on is the bond market and the fact that these countries don't have enough unity with one another to have a common currency. But that's been addressed in the architecture here, where each country will have their own monetary autonomy, their own monetary policy, trading their own currencies within their own economies across the Enbridge, which sidestepped the SWIFT, and then settling in a common token, if you will, a common currency unit that will be pegged to gold, 40%, and a basket of 60% local currencies of the BRICS nations. So the transactions being done outside the dollar will massively impact the value of the dollar and its role in reserves. And when you realize that the bond market has paled in comparison to gold over the past 25 years by a factor of 100%. In other words, 10-year Treasury has done half as good as gold has for the past 25 years, but with no counterparty risk. It's a huge, huge blow to the reserve status of the dollar. So transactions, reserve, and image of the dollar are all being massively compromised, and you can see the pieces are coming together much more swiftly. I mean, look at all of the central banks who have been funding our spending habits for a long time, have been selling over the past couple of years or a year and a half. They have been selling and buying commodities, in particular gold. What starts out as a trickle could very quickly move into much more of a rush, of a panic. We're not there yet. Mike Adams calls that Project Sandman, Operation Sandman, where there are 150 plus countries who have agreed to do just that all at once. But taking such an aggressive step to do something like that, in essence, cuts off your nose to spite your face until things are aligned. James Rickard has a very interesting take on this, and he talks about having mass adoption in order for this to really, really work. 59 countries came out of the last meeting in Novigrad 2 weeks ago and said, we're applying to BRICS. You add that to the 10, you're talking 69 countries and a that's 3 times the size of the European Union just in countries alone. And when you realize that, unlike the European Union, every one of these countries will have their own currency, but a common settlement currency, it is the composition of the settlement currency that destroys both the transaction and the settlement value of the dollar in the treasury market. what it does is it greatly starts to reduce demand for both. And as there is less demand and more supply, we would see inflation and interest rates go higher, which ultimately, little by little, starts to wreak havoc upon the system. Now, if it gets to a point where people realize that this is a global realization, that this is a trend in motion, and all of a sudden what starts out slow and orderly turns into a stampede through a rotating door, not everyone makes it through alive. And it becomes a very, very unorderly chaos type of situation that could immediately overwhelm the United States with massive inflation. And we've talked about that forever, what that looks like as interest rates go parabolic. And in the face of rising interest rates, you have banks that are undercapitalized and over-leveraged, insurance companies that are loaded with treasuries, and stocks and bonds and real estate that are all inversely correlated to that moment. And this is why I keep coming back to the fact that all of the actions that we've taken, both at home and abroad, are just too foolish to not be planned. And we talk about this all the time. Bill Holter, and I heard your interview with him. He said that I got it wrong. I like it. I like it. I watch everything you do, Done Again, and I like where he said it's not too stupid to be stupid. Andy's running around saying that. He says it's too stupid to not be planned. Okay, fine. I think it is. I mean, you have to ask yourself, how could we let these things happen? Let alone more. It's bad enough what we've done around the world with weaponizing the dollar, being hypocritical in the eyes of many of the countries in the global south and east. But to let what's happened here in this country, the destabilization of what is sacred in this country, starting with the nuclear family and everything up all the way through the electoral and judicial system that I've talked about week over week over week, I do it not to be monotonous.
AndySchectman has highlighted these changes, mainly focusing on the emergence of non-dollar-based settlement systems for energy trades. A significant example of this shift is Saudi Arabia's recent warning to the G7 alliance regarding the proposed seizure of $300 billion in frozen Russian assets. According to a Bloomberg report, Saudi Arabia privately indicated it might sell European debt holdings if the G7 proceeds with the seizure. This move underscores the strengthening ties between Saudi Arabia and Russia, both members of the expanding BRICS alliance, and demonstrates the growing economic influence of this bloc. The G7's initial proposal to seize Russian assets was intended to support Ukraine and penalize Russia. However, Saudi Arabia's inclusion in BRICS has altered the geopolitical calculus, leading to increased support between Saudi Arabia and Russia. This development highlights the changing dynamics of global economic alliances and the potential consequences of actions against BRICS members. Meanwhile, in Nigeria, lawmakers are proposing to significantly expand the central bank's authority to use gold to bolster the nation's reserves. This move aligns with a broader trend among developing countries to reduce dependence on the US dollar and diversify their economic strategies. Schectman argues that these developments could have far-reaching implications for the global financial system. He suggests that gold might increasingly substitute for US treasuries and the US dollar in international finance. Let's get back to the interview.
Just like an expansion in credit with all of the easy money and low interest rates was very bullish for the system, it will be equally, if not exponentially, more bearish. And if you realize when you talk about preparing, even in terms of food and water, how much credit is used to bring goods to the marketplace, it's extraordinary. Everyone who touches it, from the truckers to the producers to the bottlers to everyone, they're all on credit. And we're a just-in-time economy. So preparing as if literally there was a hurricane coming, and figuratively with your finances, getting out of the way of the banks, getting out of the way of the system, being a contrarian. And this is why the big money is always first, always wins. They position when no one else sees it. And why the little guy never wins is the little guy does it after it's become obvious to everybody else. Guys like myself and you and Rick Rule, we've been prepared for this for years, and maybe we were foolish to be as early as we were, maybe not. I guess that remains to be seen. But when I look at the amount of gold and silver that I've accumulated, I don't buy it to hope to get me out of a massive problem. I look at it as wealth that I hope to give to my kids someday. It's a bonus to know that you're out of the system that is arguably stretched very thin and maybe on its last leg. I do believe that, but that's not why I ultimately have accumulated for all these years. To me, it's wealth. And wealth that hopefully I don't ever need to use. If I do, I'm darn glad I have it. Maybe it's for an opportunity too, a heck of an opportunity when the dust settles. But if not, you give it to your kids. And as far as being prepared, in other ways. So what? You use the batteries, you use the dog food, you donate food to a food shelf, you drink the water, whatever it may be. It's never been more important. And to see these pieces coming together right now with what is a viable solution, I believe, for settlement outside the dollar, for energy, and to see Saudi Arabia become a full participant in a program that is not dollar compatible, Enbridge. Again, and if you look at the way the BIS operates, those central banks who brought their gold back following the Bundesbank's lead in 2017 and went on a massive buying spree for 2 years before, then the BIS said, by the way, we reclassified gold tier 1. You don't think they knew about it? Of course they did. Just like they're all being told to buy gold and bring it home now, because the new BIS system is Project Enbridge. And the unit, which is traded on Enbridge, allows for the gold, which will be the major backing component, to be held within their own borders. If you don't see that as being wholly relevant and as a substitute for the U.S. Treasury and as a substitute for the U.S. dollar, certainly the beginning seed, anyway, to see how fast it manifests and how fast it grows. And I guess that remains to be seen. But to ignore what it really truly is, and here again, most people would have no idea what this is, done again, because no one's talking about it. I am, few others are. And I spend hours digging. You got to go to websites across the globe to find this information, but it's all, go to the BIS website and look at Enbridge. If you do take the time to prepare, I think you have, it's not just about survival. You can actually get in front of this and put yourself in a position to take advantage of opportunities when others won't. And it's sad that's the true reality of it, but I'd rather know what's coming and have a chance of not just surviving, but even doing okay, thriving when others get run over by this. It's not what I wish for. It's just a sad reality of it.
The U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen also confirmed that sanctions led BRICS to kickstart the de-dollarization agenda. Given the accelerating de-dollarization efforts by BRICS nations, the shift towards gold-backed currencies, and the potential economic consequences for the U.S., how might individual investors and businesses best prepare for a possible transition away from dollar dominance in the global financial system? Share your perspective in the comment section. If the video resonates with you, join our community by subscribing to our channel and enabling notifications with the bell icon. Thank you for being a part of our community.